I want you to imagine, well, imagine the most serious, high-stakes corporate turnaround in history. Like, the whole organization is facing massive scandals, they're bleeding public trust, and the board of directors is just frantically issuing these stiff top-down memos to try and, I don't know, fix the culture.
Oh, right. It's like a classic crisis management scenario where the executives are totally panicked. And, I mean, the memos always fail because the culture is fundamentally rotten at the ground level, right?
Exactly. The rank and file aren't listening to the executives at all. So now imagine a guy walking right into the middle of this massive mess, and instead of wearing a suit and shouting orders, he's wearing his clothes completely inside out.
Wait, inside out?
Literally inside out. And he's tossing an executive's hat around like a baseball, and then he just like invites everyone out for a picnic with music and salami.
I mean, it sounds totally absurd on its face. But somehow, that guy is the one who actually saves the entire organization.
Yeah. You've just perfectly described the reality of 16th century Rome. So welcome to today's deep dive. We are traveling back to a time of just immense political and religious upheaval.
It really was.
And we pulled a really fascinating stack of sources for you today. We've got everything from historical encyclopedias and an EBSCO research article to an essay from the Imaginative Conservative on musical history. Oh, and also the official guide for the 2025 Jubilee, plus a translated collection of 16th century personal maxims.
It's a great mix of material.
It is. And looking through all of this, it's just wild to see how a man armed with a sense of humor and, an affinity for picnics managed to spark this massive cultural and spiritual revolution.
So we are talking about Philip Neri here, a figure who is often referred to in historical texts as the second apostle of Rome, right after Peter, or sometimes the third after Peter and Paul.
Which is a huge title.
Right.
But to really appreciate what he pulled off, you have to picture the absolute mess of a city that he walked into. The sources paint this deeply bleak picture of Rome in the 1500s.
Yeah, they do.
Because you might be listening to this thinking of the Renaissance as this golden age of art and enlightenment. But for the average Roman on the street, it was terrifying.
Terrifying is the right word. The city was deeply, deeply traumatized. I mean, it was still recovering from being physically and psychologically sacked in 1527 by invading troops.
Right.
We are talking about a devastating event where thousands were killed, priceless art was destroyed, and the population was just decimated. And on top of that, you have a notoriously corrupt clergy, widespread licentiousness, and these intense political machinations happening everywhere.
The EBSCO article specifically calls out the Medici family here. They were essentially using their political power to control church elections. So it wasn't about spiritual leadership at all.
No, not even a little bit.
It was about treating the church like a massive geopolitical piggy bank. The clergymen were completely neglecting the spiritual needs of the people.
Right, and the institutional response to this profound decay was the Council of Trent, which kicked off the Counter-Reformation.
Which is a huge deal historically.
Oh, absolutely. This was the church attempting to clarify doctrines and root out all these abuses. But Trent was an incredibly top-down initiative. You had all these bishops and theologians essentially locking themselves in rooms, making sweeping rules, and issuing decrees from on high.
But wait, if the top brass is finally writing new rules to fix the corruption, why isn't that enough? Why isn't Trent actually fixing the day-to-day culture of Rome?
Well, because decrees don't change human hearts. A bishop writing a very stern document about clerical discipline in a palace somewhere that doesn't stop a local merchant from cheating his customers.
Right, or help the poor.
Exactly. It doesn't give hope to a starving family in the slums. Rome needed a grassroots spiritual revitalization on the streets where the people actually live.
And enter Philip Neri. So he's born in Florence in 1515, and his origin story is so fascinating. He's initially sent off at age 18 to work for this wealthy cousin in San Germano.
Right, he was set for life.
Basically,
Yeah.
he is promised an inheritance of this highly lucrative family business, and he just walks away from it.
He experiences this profound religious conversion. The whole prospect of spending his life accumulating wealth suddenly just feels entirely empty to him. So he decides he doesn't care for the things of this world anymore. And in 1533, he heads straight to Rome.
And he arrives in Rome, and it's not like he joins a fancy seminary or anything. He moves into a tiny, unheated attic room in the house of this Florentine aristocrat named Galeotto Cascia, and he's working as a tutor for his sons.
And his diet is insane.
Literally just bread and olives.
Yeah.
He's this brilliant, charismatic guy living on absolutely nothing, operating entirely outside the institutional power structure.
Yeah, and for 17 years, he lived just as a layman. He didn't seek ordination during that entire time. He just walked around the city, striking up these informal conversations with anyone who would listen.
Anyone.
Literally anyone, from powerful bankers to prostitutes. He would go to the street corners, the market squares, the hospitals. He was just present with the people.
To see, if you're trying to disrupt this massive, corrupt system, you'd think you would need these fiery, self-important speeches, right?
Like a fire and brimstone preacher.
Yeah. You'd expect him to stand on a soapbox shouting at people about hellfire and damnation, especially given how bad the state of the city was.
But he took the exact opposite approach. He used comedy.
Which is so unexpected.
Right. He used this profound, often completely bizarre sense of humility. He had a remarkably playful sense of humor and a very shrewd wit. He fundamentally believed that a cheerful temper was way more effective at changing lives than a melancholic one.
There's that quote from his Maxims.
Yes. As one of the sources quotes his maxims, a joyful heart is more easily made perfect than a downcast one.
But how he weaponized that humor is so strange. Like, he started assigning these totally unconventional, humiliating penances to his followers.
Oh, the penances were incredibly specific and theatrical. Like, if you went to him for spiritual guidance, he might tell you to go sweep the church steps, but you had to do it while wearing an outlandish costume.
Oh my God.
Or he'd make someone carry a massive, ridiculous lapdog through the most crowded streets of Rome.
Okay, my absolute favorite detail from the sources is about a penitent who asked Neri for permission to wear a hair shirt. And for context, if you aren't familiar with medieval practices, a hair shirt is this incredibly uncomfortable garment made of coarse animal hair.
It's extremely itchy and painful.
Yeah, and you're supposed to wear it against your bare skin as a private act of, like, physical mortification and suffering. So this guy asks to wear one, and Neri says, sure, you can wear it, but you have to wear it outside your clothing for everyone to see.
Which completely flips the entire intention of the garment.
Hold on, though.
Yeah.
If a hair shirt is supposed to be private and you wear it over your nice velvet jacket, you aren't actually suffering physically anymore. Doesn't that just turn into a massive virtue signal?
Like they're showing off.
Yeah. Aren't you just showing off to the whole town how incredibly holy you are?
You would think so, but you have to understand the specific social dynamics of 16th century Roman aristocrats. They were utterly obsessed with dignity, status, and fashion.
Oh, true.
So an aristocrat walking around the piazza with dirty goat hair, strapped over a pristine doublet, he didn't look holy to the onlookers. He looked completely insane. He looked like a fool.
So it's not about physical suffering at all. It's an attack on the ego.
Precisely. Neri recognized that self-love and pride were the actual root of the era's corruption. The clerics and the nobles were so desperate to maintain their elite status. So humiliation, in Neri's hands, was a psychological tool to force authenticity.
Because you can't be haughty if people are pointing and laughing at you.
Exactly. You cannot feel morally superior when the entire street is laughing at you. He wanted to strip away all that pretense.
And he didn't just hand these assignments out, he subjected himself to them. The sources describe him mocking his own dignity constantly. He would walk around the streets of Rome with only half his beard shaved off.
Just half of it.
Yeah, and he would wear his clothes inside out. Oh, and when the Pope offered him the red hat of a cardinal, which, I mean, that was the ultimate status symbol, the thing the Medici family spent absolute fortunes trying to acquire, Neri treated it as a joke.
He really did.
He literally tossed the hat around like a ball and told the Pope's messenger he'd rather have paradise.
He was completely terrified of being revered. If he felt people were starting to treat him like a living saint, he would immediately do something ridiculous to ruin his own reputation.
Which is kind of brilliant.
It is. In the collection of his personal maxims we're reviewing today, he explicitly warns, let no one wear a mask, otherwise he will do ill. He demanded absolute transparency.
It's fascinating because he is intentionally acting like a clown, but the maxims also include a very strict caveat about that. He explicitly warns that pure buffoonery incapacitates a person from spiritual growth.
Right. He drew a sharp line between ego-crushing humor and mindless chaos.
So it wasn't just goofing off.
No, not at all. The humor always had a deeply serious undercurrent. It was a mechanism designed specifically to break down the walls people built around themselves, and once those walls of pride were down, real spiritual work could finally begin.
But taking religion out of the dusty elite Latin academies and bringing it to the streets didn't stop with the comedy, though. This approach actually birthed a completely new, historically massive musical genre.
Yeah, we see Neri's influence extend way beyond his immediate followers here. It reaches right into the broader canon of Western culture.
So Neri starts holding these evening gatherings in a hall, and they simply called the hall the Oratory. Originally, it was just an informal meeting for prayer, readings from scripture, and discussion.
But Neri realizes that to keep people engaged, especially the young people and the fashionable courtiers of Rome who are used to being entertained, he needs to bring in music.
He needs to make it vibrant.
Exactly. So he encouraged the singing of laud, which were these spiritual songs performed in the Italian vernacular, not in church Latin.
Which is huge. That meant the local bakers, merchants, and teenagers could actually understand what they were singing.
Right. And soon he began setting entire sacred stories to music. He even had the famed composer Giovanni Pierluigi da Palestrina participating in composing for these services.
And this directly evolves into the musical form we now know as the oratorio, which is a sacred, unstaged, dramatic musical work.
The distinction of it being unstaged is so vital here. You have to remember, this is the era of the Italian Renaissance. Opera was developing right alongside the oratorio.
Right, and opera is a massive production.
Exactly. Opera was this lavish spectacle with sumptuous costumes, elaborate scenery, massive casts, and themes that were usually drawn from classical mythology.
Opera was essentially the exclusive, wildly expensive IMAX 3D movie premiere of its day. I mean, it was purely for the aristocrats because it required massive financial resources to stage. But the oratorio, by contrast, is like a high-quality audiobook or a really gripping radio drama.
That's a great way to put it. And that lack of staging changed everything. Because there were no costumes or sets, it was incredibly cheap to produce. It could be performed anywhere.
And it still had all the drama. Composers structured it just like an opera, with these arias and choruses to move the plot forward.
Right. It became what the essay from the imaginative conservative calls theater of the mind. It focused on human emotion and sacred history, rather than visual spectacle.
It's so accessible.
By removing the expensive staging, Neri bridged the gap between the secular and the sacred. He created an artistic experience that the middle class could actually participate in.
And it laid the groundwork for absolute giants of classical music later on. I mean, Bach's Passions, Handel's Messiah, these masterpieces are direct descendants of what Philip Neri was experimenting with in his oratory.
He used beauty as honey to draw souls. He knew you couldn't just lecture people into changing their lives, you had to captivate them.
But captivating them indoors eventually wasn't enough either. He wanted people moving, connecting, and eating together. And this is where the 2025 Jubilee sources come in, detailing an event from 1553, the birth of the Seven Churches Walk.
Which remains one of the oldest Roman traditions still practiced today, especially during Jubilee years.
For those trying to picture this, it's a 25-kilometer pilgrimage across Rome. You are hitting major basilicas like St. Peter's, St. John Lateran, and St. Mary Major. It takes an entire day.
It's quite a trek.
Yeah. And Neri designed this specifically as a wholesome, communal counterpoint to the Roman carnival.
Because the Roman carnival was notorious for its raucous, often very dangerous behavior, it was a time of intense debauchery right before the solemnity of Lent.
See, if I'm a 16th century religious reformer, my instinct is to stand in the street and yell at people, "Don't go to the carnival, it's a sin, you're all going to hell."
Which is exactly what many clerics were doing at the time. And it simply wasn't working. Neri understood human nature deeply. He knew that simply forbidding a massive citywide party wouldn't work. You have to provide a compelling, joyful alternative.
And the alternative he builds is wild. They would gather before dawn, hundreds, eventually thousands of people walking across the city, singing hymns and listening to brief sermons.
But here's the best part.
Halfway through this exhausting walk, they stopped for a massive prearranged picnic. The Mattei family literally opened up the gardens of their villa, and Neri provided bread, wine, cheese, eggs, apples, and salami for everyone.
Plus, musicians and singers performed while they ate.
That's amazing.
He was engaging all the senses, he was combining physical exertion with spiritual reflection, and capping it off with profound communal joy.
This just doesn't sound like strict 16th century religious suffering to me. A 25-kilometer walk with singing and salami sounds like a massive community block party or like a wholesome flash mob.
Sharing a meal, sharing a walk, sharing music, these are the tangible things that bind people together. He knew that people needed community to reform their lives, not just rigid rules and finger-wagging from a pulpit.
But building a community out of a picnic and a walk is one thing. Turning that into a lasting institution seems impossible. Yet this unique blend of humor, art, and picnics birthed a movement that was remarkably loose in its structure, but incredibly strong in his loyalty.
Yes. In 1575, Pope Gregory III formally recognized Neri's group as the Congregation of the Oratory. And the structural design of this organization is just astounding.
It violates every rule of institutional management. They were secular priests, but they took absolutely no formal vows, none.
Great.
They kept their own personal property, and they were completely free to leave the community at any time of the day or night.
Which, in a heavily regulated system like the 16th century church, where joining an order usually meant a lifetime binding contract of poverty, chastity, and obedience, this was radical.
How does a system with no contracts or vows not instantly fail? I mean, it's like a gym membership you can cancel any time with no penalties. Why didn't everyone just leave when things got difficult?
Because voluntary commitment, driven by a shared culture of joy and genuine friendship, is infinitely stronger than forced obligation. Neri's ultimate legacy is proving that people stay because they want to stay.
Wow.
The community was held together by the personal magnetism and the immense charity of Philip Neri himself.
And his capacity for charity wasn't just a metaphor for his followers. It was a literal physical phenomenon. The source material outlines an incredibly strange physical anomaly regarding his heart.
Yeah, in 1544, long before the congregation was officially formed, Neri was praying in the Catacombs of San Sebastiano. He often went down there at night to pray among the tombs of the early martyrs.
Creepy, but okay.
And during this intense prayer, he claimed a ball of fire entered his mouth and lodged in his chest.
The physiological aftermath of this is what's so bizarre. Observers throughout his life noted that his heartbeat was so forceful it could literally be heard from across a room.
Right, people could hear it audibly.
And the heat radiating from his chest was so intense that he would walk around with his shirt unbuttoned in the dead of winter.
And when he died in 1595, autopsies revealed something extraordinary. His heart was so significantly enlarged that it had actually broken 2 of his ribs, pushing them outward to make room for itself in his chest cavity.
It's crazy. Medical historians like Pope Benedict XIV, who later reviewed the case, concluded it was likely an aneurysm or a massive cardiomegaly.
Biographers still debate the medical versus supernatural explanations today, but regardless of the pathology, for Neri and his followers, that enlarged, rib-breaking heart was the visceral, physical manifestation of his boundless capacity for love.
You hear boundless love, and you might picture someone who is soft or, easily manipulated. But Neri was not a pushover. When the stakes were high enough, he could play geopolitical chess with the best of them.
Oh, definitely. He generally avoided politics at all costs, but a pivotal moment arose in the 1590s. King Henry IV of France had renounced Calvinism and wanted to reconcile with the Catholic Church,
Which was a massive deal for the stability of Europe.
However, Pope Clement VIII, who was backed by a heavily Spanish-influenced college of cardinals, refused to lift the king's excommunication.
Right, because it's Rome. And every theological decision is also a high-stakes political chess match. Spain didn't want a strong, united France.
And Neri saw past all the politics. He realized that the Pope's stubbornness would likely drive the French king to relapse into Protestantism, which would plunge France right back into a bloody, devastating civil war.
So Neri decides to use his unique leverage.
The leverage is incredible.
One of Neri's closest followers, a man named Caesar Baronius, happened to be the Pope's personal confessor.
Right. Neri orders Baronius to go to the Pope and refuse him absolution. He tells Baronius to deny the Pope the sacrament of confession until the Pope yields and forgives the French king.
Hold up. He's the Pope. He's the head of the church. If one priest refuses to forgive his sins, can't the Pope just snap his fingers, fire Baronius, and get any other bishop in Rome to hear his confession? Why is this such a paralyzing threat?
Well, theoretically, he could find another priest. But in the theology of the time, dying with unforgiven mortal sins meant risking eternal damnation.
Okay, high stakes.
The Pope's confessor isn't just an employee. He's the spiritual guide trusted with the state of the pontiff's eternal soul. Having a revered figure like Baronius, acting on the explicit orders of a living saint like Neri, tell you that your political stubbornness is a sin so grave that God won't forgive you.
Wow.
That is a spiritual hostage situation. It terrified Clement VIII.
The guy who wears his clothes inside out and throws his hat around just cornered the most powerful man in Europe.
Yeah.
And it worked.
It did. The Pope yielded, the excommunication of Henry IV was revoked, and a massive French Civil War was averted.
It perfectly encapsulates Neri's character. He was fiercely pragmatic, he utilized humility and joy, but he never lost sight of the ultimate goal, saving lives and saving souls.
Absolutely.
We started this deep dive talking about a corporate turnaround. Philip Neri walked into a corrupt, broken city. He totally bypassed the rigid top-down corporate memos of the Council of Trent.
He went straight to the streets.
Yeah, straight to the streets with self-deprecating humor, salami picnics, and an unstaged musical format. He transformed 16th century Rome entirely from the ground up.
And, the sources mention that Neri's maxims were compiled by his followers to be a daily spiritual repast, like a small, challenging bite of wisdom to chew on each day. One of those maxims, which we touched on earlier, was his strict warning to never wear a mask.
His absolute demand for authenticity.
Right. And as we wrap up this exploration, I think it's really worth taking that specific 16th century warning and applying it to our lives today.
Oh, for sure.
Because you and I live in an era entirely defined by highly curated, filter-heavy digital identities. We are constantly managing our personal brands on social media, presenting these optimized versions of our lives to the public.
It's exhausting.
It is. So if Philip Neri were alive today, looking at the digital avatars we present to the world, how would his radical demand for self-mockery challenge us? What would actually happen in your life, your relationships, or your community if you took off the masks you wear every single day?
Man, that is a phenomenal thought to sit with. If you're listening, let that question linger. A huge thank you to you for joining us on this deep dive into the rogue reformer of Rome. We hope this sparked some genuine discoveries for you today, and we invite you to keep exploring. Until next time.